The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that screams secrets. I stood in our bedroom, clutching the plane ticket I'd printed for show, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. I told Mark I was leaving for a week. Work conference, I said. But the truth was I wasn't going anywhere. It started with the late nights. Mark, my husband of 10 years, had always been predictable. Home by 6, dinner by 7, a kiss before bed. But lately he'd been distant, his phone glued to his hand, his excuses flimsy. Client dinners, he'd mutter, avoiding my eyes. I wasn't naive. I'd seen the signs: lipstick on a shirt collar, a perfume I didn't wear lingering on his jacket. My gut screamed betrayal, but my heart begged for proof. So I bought the cameras. Tiny, discreet, hidden in the living room, kitchen, and our bedroom. I needed to know. I needed to see. The plan was simple. Pretend to leave for Chicago, drive to a motel 2 towns over, and watch the live feed from my laptop. I'd packed a suitcase, kissed him goodbye, and driven away, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Now, in that sterile motel room, I sat cross-legged on the bed, the laptop's glow casting shadows on my face. The cameras were live. Mark was home, and I was about to uncover the truth. He moved through the house like nothing was wrong. I watched him pour a glass of wine, his movements relaxed, almost smug. My stomach churned. Was this the man I'd vowed to love forever? The man who'd cried when our daughter, Lily, was born? The screen flickered, and I leaned closer, my breath hitching as the front door opened. A woman stepped inside. Blonde, tall, her laugh sharp and unfamiliar. My heart stopped. It was her, the one I'd suspected but never named. They didn't waste time. Mark's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, their lips meeting in a way that made my chest cave in. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop across the room, but I couldn't look away. The cameras caught every detail. The way her fingers tangled in his hair, the way he smiled against her mouth. It was intimate, practiced like this wasn't the first time. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, tears blurring my vision. I'd seen enough, but I wasn't done. I needed to know who she was. I needed to know why. The cameras kept rolling as they moved to the couch, oblivious to the eyes watching them. I opened my laptop's browser, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Her face was burned into my mind, and I started searching: social media, mutual friends, anything. Hours passed, the motel room growing darker, my heart heavier. Then I found her. Emily Carter, 34, married. Her husband's name was David. My breath caught. She wasn't just cheating on her husband. She was destroying mine. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced, piecing together a plan. Confronting Mark alone wouldn't be enough. This wasn't just about us, it was about 2 marriages, 2 betrayals. I needed an ally. I needed David. By dawn, I'd found his contact info through a mutual friend's LinkedIn. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitation gripping me. What do you say to a stranger whose wife is sleeping with your husband? I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I sent the message: David, I'm Claire, Mark Thompson's wife. We need to talk. It's about Emily. The reply came faster than I expected. I know something's wrong. Name the time and place. His words were clipped, angry. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our towns the next day. I closed my laptop, the camera feed still running in the background, Mark and Emily's laughter echoing in my head. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious, and I was ready to fight. The coffee shop was small, the kind of place where people go to hide. David was already there when I arrived, his broad shoulders hunched over a steaming mug. He was older than I expected, mid-40s, with tired eyes and a jaw clenched tight. I slid into the booth across from him, my heart racing. "Claire?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, and we didn't bother with small talk. I showed him the footage. His face hardened, his knuckles whitening around the mug. "That's her," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That's my wife." We sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound by shared betrayal. Then he looked at me, his eyes sharp. "What do we do?" I hadn't planned this far, but the words spilled out. "We don't confront them yet. We gather more proof, patterns, anything to make them face what they've done." David nodded, his jaw tight. We were in this together now, a pact forged in pain. Over the next hour, we planned. More cameras, more watching, more waiting. We'd build a case so airtight they couldn't lie their way out. But as I drove back to the motel, a new fear settled in. What would happen when the truth came out? Could I face Mark? Could I face myself? By the end of the first day, I was already breaking. The cameras showed Mark and Emily in our home again, their ease with each other, a knife in my chest. I watched, tears streaming, as they cooked dinner together, laughing like they belonged there, like I was the intruder. But I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. With David by my side, I'd make sure they felt the weight of their choices. This was just the beginning. The motel room became my war room. The laptop stayed on, its screen a window into my unraveling life. Mark and Emily's routine was sickeningly predictable. Nights spent in our home, their laughter-filling spaces meant for me and Lily. I hadn't told our daughter yet. She was only 8, too young to understand why her dad was breaking our family. But every giggle from Emily on the camera feed felt like a theft, stealing moments I could never get back. David and I texted constantly, our messages a mix of strategy and shared grief. He'd installed cameras in his own home, catching Emily sneaking out with flimsy excuses. "Book club," she'd told him. "Girls' night." Lies stacked on lies. We shared screenshots, timestamps, anything to build our case. But it wasn't just about evidence, it was about understanding. How long had this been going on? How had we missed it? I started digging deeper. Mark's phone was synced to our shared cloud account, a detail he'd forgotten. Late at night, I scoured his texts, emails, call logs. There were messages to Emily stretching back 6 months, casual at first, then intimate, then brazen. "Miss you already," he'd written after a client dinner. "Can't wait to see you," she'd replied, with a heart emoji that made my stomach turn. They'd planned their meetups meticulously, always when I was working late or at Lily's school events. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. David's findings were just as damning. Emily had a separate email account, one she thought was hidden. It was full of plans with Mark, hotel receipts, dinner reservations, even a weekend trip they'd taken when David thought she was visiting her sister. We swapped discoveries like soldiers trading weapons, each piece sharpening our resolve. But it also deepened our pain. David confessed he hadn't slept in days. I hadn't either. The motel bed felt like a prison, the walls closing in with every new clip I watched. One night, the cameras caught something new. Mark and Emily were in our bedroom, her head on his chest, talking softly. I turned up the volume, my hands shaking. "What happens when Claire gets back?" Emily asked, her voice nervous. Mark shrugged, his tone cold. "She won't find out. She's too busy with work." My blood boiled. He thought I was oblivious, too caught up in my career to notice his lies. I wanted to drive home and scream at him, but I held back. David's text came through, "Stay calm. We're close." Close to what? I wasn't sure. We had enough evidence to confront them, but it didn't feel like enough. I wanted them to hurt the way we did. I wanted them to lose something. David suggested a public confrontation, maybe at a restaurant they frequented where their friends might see. I liked the idea, but it felt too small. This wasn't just about shame. It was about justice. I started researching divorce lawyers, my fingers hovering over the call button. But every time I thought of Lily, I stopped. How do you explain this to a child? David and I met again, this time at a park to avoid prying eyes. He looked worse than before, his face gaunt, his eyes red. "I found something," he said, sliding a USB drive across the picnic table. "Bank statements. They've been spending money together, thousands." I stared at the drive, my mind racing. Mark had always handled our finances. Had he been using our savings for her? I plugged the drive into my laptop, my heart sinking as I saw the transactions. Hotels, jewelry, a deposit for a weekend cabin. Our money, our life. "We can use this," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Not just for confrontation, for court." David nodded, his jaw tight. "I want her to lose everything," he said, his voice raw. "Her job, her friends, her pride." I understood. I wanted the same for Mark. But as we planned, a new fear crept in. What if this destroyed us too? What if Lily grew up hating me for tearing her world apart? That night, back at the motel, I watched the cameras again. Mark was alone, pacing the kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear. "I'm done sneaking around," he said, his voice sharp. "We need to tell them." My heart stopped. Was he planning to leave me? To confess? I texted David immediately, my fingers shaking. "They're talking about coming clean. We need to act fast." His reply was instant. "Tomorrow. We end this." I barely slept, my mind spinning with what-ifs. Tomorrow we'd confront them. Tomorrow I'd face the man I thought I knew. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Mark's restless pacing, his nervous glances at the door. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know it was me. The morning of the confrontation felt unreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. I drove back to town, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. David and I had planned every detail. We'd confront Mark and Emily together, at our house, where they felt safest. The cameras would still be rolling, capturing their reactions. I wanted them to see themselves as we saw them. Liars, betrayers, destroyers of trust. David met me a block from my house, his truck parked under a sycamore tree. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, his eyes hollow but determined. "You ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. My heart was a mess of anger, fear, and grief. I didn't just want answers, I wanted to reclaim my life. We walked to the house in silence, the weight of our plan pressing down on us. The cameras had shown Mark and Emily there all morning, lounging like they owned the place. My key turned in the lock, and I pushed the door open, David close behind. The living room was empty, but I heard voices from the kitchen. Emily's laugh, Mark's low murmur. My stomach twisted. This was it. We stepped into the kitchen, and time froze. Mark was at the counter pouring coffee. Emily sat at the table, her legs crossed, a smile fading as she saw us. Mark turned, his face paling. "Claire?" he stammered, the mug slipping from his hand. It shattered on the floor, coffee splattering like blood. Emily stood, her eyes darting between me and David. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice high, panicked. "You tell me," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. I pulled out my phone, the camera app open, and played the footage from last night. Mark and Emily tangled together on our couch, their faces drained of color. David stepped forward, his voice like steel. "And this?" he said, holding up his phone with a screenshot of their hotel receipt. "Care to explain, Emily?" They stammered, their excuses colliding. "It's not what it looks like," Mark said, his hands raised like he could stop this. Emily tried. "David, I was going to tell you." But he cut her off. "Don't," he snapped. "We've seen everything. The cameras, the emails, the bank statements. You're done." The room felt like it was shrinking, the air thick with their panic and our rage. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I held steady, my eyes locked on Mark. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "How long have you been lying to me?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. Emily tried to speak, but David silenced her with a look. "You don't get to talk," he said. "You've done enough." We laid it all out, the footage, the messages, the money they'd spent. Mark's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd loved, the one who'd promised me forever. But that man was gone. replaced by this stranger who'd betrayed me. Emily was crying now, her hands covering her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it meant nothing. Sorry doesn't undo a marriage. David and I had agreed not to drag this out. We wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, but we wouldn't stoop to their level. "You have 1 hour to get out," I told Mark, my voice steady despite the tears burning my eyes. "Pack your things and go." David turned to Emily. "Same for you. We're done." They didn't argue. Maybe they knew they'd lost. Mark tried to approach me, his hand reaching out, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said, my voice breaking. "You've done enough." He nodded, his eyes wet, and started packing. Emily followed, her movements frantic, like she could outrun the truth. David and I stood in the living room, watching them scramble. The cameras were still on, recording every moment. I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow ache. This wasn't victory, it was survival. As Mark carried a suitcase to the door, he paused, looking back at me. "I love you, Claire," he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't respond. Love doesn't do this. When they were gone, the house felt emptier than ever. David and I sat on the couch, staring at the wreckage of our lives. "What now?" he asked, his voice raw. I didn't know. The cameras were still running, but there was nothing left to see. Just two broken people trying to figure out how to start again. The days after the confrontation were a blur of silence and paperwork. I stayed in the house, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Every corner held a memory of Mark's betrayal. Our couch, our kitchen, our bed. I slept in Lily's room, her stuffed animals my only company while she was at her grandparents'. I couldn't face her yet. How do you tell an 8-year-old her father broke her world? David and I kept in touch, our texts a lifeline in the chaos. He'd kicked Emily out, and she was staying with a friend, begging for forgiveness he wasn't ready to give. Mark had moved into a cheap apartment across town, texting me daily. Apologies, excuses, please to talk. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to hear his voice, to see the face I'd loved for a decade. Instead, I met with a divorce lawyer, a sharp woman named Karen who promised to protect Lily and me. "You've got a strong case," she said, flipping through the evidence we'd gathered. The footage, the bank statements, it's airtight. But airtight didn't mean painless. Dividing assets, discussing custody, it felt like carving up my life with a dull knife. Karen suggested I sell the house. "Too many memories," she said. She was right, but the thought of leaving the place where Lily grew up gutted me. I wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. David was struggling too. He called one night, his voice heavy with whiskey and regret. "I keep thinking I should have known," he said. "There were signs, Claire. I ignored them." I understood. I'd ignored Mark's late nights, his sudden interest in new cologne, his guarded phone. We'd both been blind, trusting the people we loved. Now we were paying the price. I started seeing a therapist, a quiet woman with kind eyes who let me cry without judgment. She asked me to write down what I wanted, not for Mark, not for Lily, but for me. I stared at the blank page for hours. I didn't know anymore. I'd been Mark's wife, Lily's mom, a marketing manager. But who was Claire without those roles? The cameras were off now, packed away in a box, but I still felt watched, like my own guilt was filming me. Had I been too busy? Too distant? Had I pushed him away? David and I met again, this time at a diner. He looked better, his eyes clearer, but the weight of betrayal still hung on him. "I'm selling the house," he said, starting fresh. I envied his decisiveness. He slid a folder across the table, more evidence, this time from Emily's work email. She'd been using company funds for her trips with Mark. "I'm turning this over to her boss," he said. "She'll lose her job." I nodded, but my heart twisted. Revenge felt good in theory, but it didn't fill the hole inside me. That night, I went through Mark's things, the ones he'd left behind. Old photos, his college sweatshirt, a note he'd written me years ago. "Claire, you're my home." I cried until my throat was raw. The cameras had shown me the truth, but they couldn't show me how to move on. I texted David, "Did we do the right thing?" His reply came slow. "We did what we had to." Lily came home the next day, her eyes wide with questions. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, clutching her stuffed bunny. I knelt down, my heart breaking. "Daddy's staying somewhere else for now," I said, forcing a smile. "But he loves you, and I love you, and we're going to be okay." She nodded, but I saw the doubt in her eyes. I hated Mark for that, for making her question our family. I started packing away his things, each item a reminder of what we'd lost. But as I folded his shirts, I found a letter tucked in a drawer. It was from Emily, dated a month ago. "Mark, we need to stop. This isn't fair to David or Claire." My hands shook. She'd wanted to end it. Why hadn't he? I sat on the floor, the letter crumpled in my fist, and cried for the life I thought we had. The cameras had caught the betrayal, but they couldn't capture the why. And that was the question that haunted me most. Life without Mark settled into a strange rhythm. Lily went back to school, her questions about her dad quieter but no less painful. I kept up the facade of normalcy. Breakfast, carpool, work. But inside, I was unraveling. The house felt like a museum of our marriage, every photo and knickknack a reminder of what I'd lost. I started boxing things up, not ready to sell but needing to reclaim the space. David was moving faster. He'd sold his house and rented a small apartment, his texts now focused on rebuilding. "I'm taking a woodworking class," he wrote one day. "Keeps my hands busy." I envied his ability to find purpose. I was still stuck, replaying the camera footage in my mind, hearing Mark's voice. "She won't find out." The anger kept me going, but it was exhausting. Karen, my lawyer, called with updates. Mark had hired his own attorney, and negotiations were starting. He wanted joint custody of Lily, a house share, and half our savings. "He's got no leverage," Karen said, her voice confident. "The evidence buries him." But it didn't feel like a win. Splitting custody meant splitting Lily's life, and the thought of her shuttling between us made my chest ache. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from this mess, but I didn't know how. One night, Lily crawled into my bed, her eyes red from crying. "Is Daddy coming back?" she asked, her voice small. I held her close, my heart breaking. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, hating the truth. "But we're going to be okay. Just you and me." She nodded, but I felt her doubt. I lay awake long after she fell asleep, staring at the ceiling. The cameras were gone, but I still felt like I was watching my life fall apart. David suggested we meet with a mediator, not for reconciliation but to settle things civilly. I agreed, though the thought of seeing Mark made my skin crawl. We met at a neutral office, a sterile room with beige walls and fake plants. Mark looked thinner, his eyes tired. Emily wasn't there. David said she'd moved out of state, too ashamed to face anyone. I didn't care. My focus was Mark. He tried to apologize again, his voice low. "Claire, I messed up. I know I hurt you." I cut him off. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt Lily." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd loved. But it wasn't enough. We agreed on temporary custody. Lily with me during the week, weekends with him. The house would stay mine for now. He didn't fight it. Maybe he knew he'd lost the right. After the meeting, I drove to the park where David and I had planned our confrontation. Felt like a lifetime ago. I sat on a bench, watching families laugh and play, their lives untouched by betrayal. My phone buzzed, David, checking in. "You okay?" he asked. I wasn't, but I typed back, "Getting there." Work became my escape. I threw myself into projects, staying late to avoid the empty house. My boss noticed, offering a promotion that meant more responsibility but also more purpose. I took it, needing something to fill the void. But every night, when I tucked Lily in, the questions came back. Why had Mark done this? Could I have stopped it? I started journaling, my therapist's suggestion. Pages filled with anger, grief, and questions I'd never answer. But one night, I wrote something new. I deserve better. It was a small spark, but it felt like a start. I wasn't just Mark's wife anymore. I was Claire, and I was finding my way. David invited me to his woodworking class, a gesture of friendship more than anything. I went, clumsy with the tools but grateful for the distraction. He showed me how to carve a simple box, his hand steady as he guided mine. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice quiet. I didn't believe him, but I wanted to. As I sanded the wood, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could rebuild, too. Months passed, and the divorce papers were nearly finalized. Karen had been ruthless, ensuring I kept the house and primary custody of Lily. Mark didn't fight it, his guilt a silent surrender. He saw Lily every other weekend, their time together strained but improving. She'd come home with stories of ice cream and park visits, her smile a little brighter each time. I hated him for what he'd done, but I couldn't hate him for trying with her. I started redecorating the house, painting over the memories. The living room got a bright blue accent wall, Lily's choice. We hung new photos, her at soccer, us at the zoo, me smiling at my promotion party. The cameras stayed boxed up, a relic of a life I didn't want to relive. But sometimes, late at night, I'd think about that footage, the way Mark's face had lit up with Emily. Still hurt, but the pain was duller now, like a bruise fading. David and I became friends, our shared trauma a strange bond. He'd moved on to bigger woodworking projects, even selling a few pieces online. "You should try it," he said one day, showing me a carved chair he'd made. I laughed, but I was proud of him. He'd found a way to turn pain into something tangible. I was still searching for that. Lily started therapy too, a child psychologist who helped her process the divorce. She drew pictures of our family, me, her, and sometimes Mark, but never Emily. "I don't like her," she told me one day, her voice firm. I didn't push. She was healing in her own way, and I was learning to let her. Work kept me grounded. The promotion meant longer hours but also respect, a team that looked to me for answers. I started mentoring a younger colleague, Sarah, who reminded me of myself 10 years ago. Eager, a little lost. Helping her gave me purpose, a reminder that I wasn't just defined by my marriage. I was good at something. I mattered. One evening, Mark called. I almost didn't answer, but Lily was with him, and I worried something was wrong. "Claire," he said, his voice hesitant. "I'm seeing a therapist. I'm trying to understand why I did this." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, but another part was tired. "That's good," I said finally. "For Lily." He paused, then whispered, "I'm so sorry." I hung up, my heart heavy but not broken anymore. David invited me to a gallery showing his woodwork, a small event with local artists. I went, Lily in tow, her hand in mine. The gallery was warm, filled with people admiring David's pieces. He looked different, lighter, like he'd shed some of the weight of the past. "You did this?" I said, gesturing to a carved table. He smiled. "We both did." I knew what he meant. We'd survived together. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I'm not there yet, but I'm moving." The words felt true. I wasn't the woman who'd hidden cameras, who'd cried in a motel room. I was someone new, someone stronger. Lily slept soundly in her room, the house quiet but not empty. It was ours now, mine and hers, and we were building something new. I started taking pottery classes, a whim that turned into a passion. Shaping clay felt like shaping myself, molding something broken into something whole. My first bowl was lopsided, but Lily loved it, using it for her cereal every morning. "It's perfect," she said, and I believed her. For the first time in months, I felt like I was enough. A year after the confrontation, I stood in our backyard, watching Lily chase fireflies. The divorce was final, the house officially mine, and the pain of Mark's betrayal a quiet ache instead of a scream. I'd sold the cameras, donated his old clothes, and turned our bedroom into a sanctuary. New linens, soft lights, a space that felt like me. Lily was thriving, her laughter a reminder that we'd survived. David had moved across town, his woodworking business growing. We met for coffee sometimes, no longer bound by betrayal but by a quiet friendship. He was dating again, a kind woman who made him smile. I wasn't ready for that, but I was happy for him. He'd found peace and I was close. Work was a constant, my team leaning on me as I leaned on them. Sarah, my mentee, had landed her first big project, and I felt a pride I hadn't expected. I was building something, not just pots in my pottery class, but a life. I started volunteering at Lily's school, reading to her class, watching her beam when I walked in. She was my anchor, my reason to keep going. Mark was trying too. His therapist had helped him face his choices, and he was honest with Lily about his mistakes, in ways she could understand. "Daddy said he hurt you," she told me one night, her eyes serious. "But he loves us." I nodded, my throat tight. "He does," I said, and I meant it. His love wasn't enough to save our marriage, but it was enough for Lily, and that mattered. I kept journaling, filling pages with hopes instead of hurts. I wrote about the future, travel with Lily, maybe a dog, a pottery studio in the garage. I wrote about forgiveness, not for Mark but for myself. I'd blamed myself for not seeing the signs, for not being enough. But I was enough. I always had been. One evening, I took Lily to the beach, a place we'd loved as a family. She ran through the waves, her laughter carrying over the water. I sat on the sand, the sunset painting the sky in pinks and golds. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the past. The cameras had shown me the truth, but they'd also shown me my strength. I'd faced the worst and come out stronger. David texted me a photo of his latest project, a bench carved with intricate patterns. "For your backyard," he wrote. I smiled, picturing it under the oak tree where Lily played. I texted back, "It's beautiful. Thank you." And I meant more than the bench. He'd been there when I needed an ally, when I needed to believe I could survive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily ran to me, her hands full of shells. "Look, Mom," she said, her eyes bright. I hugged her, the shells pressing into my palms. "They're perfect," I said, and we sat together watching the waves. The cameras were gone, the footage deleted, but the lessons remained. I'd lost a marriage, but I'd found myself, and that was worth everything.